afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Goodman, Museum Director here at El Rancho de las Golondrinas, and welcome to another edition of the Golondrinas Live Sessions. We're really excited today and this week because we're now open for general admission. So if you haven't yet, make sure you come on out and see us Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4. We have a number of guests who are with us live today, taking a look at our live session topic. And I can tell you that today for this live session, as many of you know, we had to cancel our June festivals. One of those festivals is Spring Festival. During that time, we usually shear our sheep, our flock of Churro Sheep. So we thought, hey, why not bring the sheep shearing to all of you? So we'll go ahead and we'll go through the process of sheep shearing and why we do it. And really, without any further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to our Manager of Education and Volunteers, Laura Gonzalez. Many of you know her as the usual face here on the live sessions, but she'll go ahead and introduce our sheep shearer today and talk a little bit more about this long-standing practice that's done here in New Mexico by hand, not by electric clippers. So, Laura, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome again. Thank you all for our audience out there on Facebook for joining us once again. We sure appreciate you always tuning in with us to see something special. As Daniel mentioned, we're so excited because we actually have live visitors here today. And it feels good to be on site on the ranch with everybody together again. And today we have a very special presentation here. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. James Jaramillo here, who's done a lot of our sheep shearing over the past several years. This happens every year, as Daniel mentioned. This usually takes place during our Spring and Fiber Festival, which we unfortunately were not able to do. So we're really grateful that we're able to do this and share this with you again today. So before I get out of James's way here, I'm going to just get him to say a little bit and introduce a little bit about this process. So hi, James. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. So can you explain to the folks here and the folks on Facebook here a little bit about what this process is like and the tools that you're using and maybe why we do this?
I'm using these hand shears right now because they keep the sheep a lot more calm. They don't stress out. Plus, you got less of a chance to cut them. And if you cut them, it ain't bad.
Excellent.
The electric shears will actually cut them really deep. This will just be a little snip. So.
Awesome. I think that's a lot of questions that people has is, are you hurting the sheep? No, in fact, we're doing a great service for the sheep. It's pretty hot out here, and so this is really helpful. It keeps the sheep nice and healthy and clean. What happens, James, if this doesn't get done?
If they don't get done, they can overheat. They can get worms under their wool, and actually, I've seen them where they get heat stroke. They could actually die because it's too hot.
Nobody wants that. Heat stroke is not good, and you can imagine we're all a little warm out here today. Having this thick fleece would be pretty detrimental. So all of our sheep are going to get these sheep cuts, and I'm going to step out of the way here and let James do his thing. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those into the comments, and then we'll make sure and answer those.
Yeah, we don't have to do it into the mic necessarily. Do you want to take the mic over?
Absolutely. This is live, folks. So we're going with it over here. We have a question here from our live audience. I might be off camera, but I think you all can hear us out there on Facebook.
I'm curious to know how much that wool would be worth then and now. What was the question?
That's a great question. The question was, how much would this wool, this fleece, be worth then and now? Do we have any guesses from our audience? Well, that's tough to say, and unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer in dollars or pesos or reales, but I can say that it would have been really valuable, especially here at El Rancho de las Golondrinas. This would have been a main item, a trade commodity. So there wasn't a lot of specie in circulation sometimes, so they relied on the trade and barter system, and so this would have been a really valuable commodity to have and would have been something really valuable, particularly here along El Camino Real.
So when we used to sell the fleece, it was by weight, by pounds, how many pounds of fleece is. We would also take the fleece, first we would weigh it, then we would skirt the fleece, and the fleece that wasn't usable would be discarded. We'd weigh it again just to know how much we had. Depending on the color and also the age of the sheep, the fleece can vary in price. The older the fleece is, the more coarse the wool is going to be. So you want a younger, softer fleece. We take ours to Mora Mill up in Mora, New Mexico, to get it cleaned and then carded and then spun into a weavable material. So really, I think that the best answer to the question is the quality of the fleece and the weight. Usually you don't sell fleece just as a fleece. You've usually processed it first.
Is his goal to get it all together one piece?
I try.
I'll answer for James, if you don't mind, buddy.
That's fine, dude.
The getting it all together is, that is the goal. You want it to come off in one big blanket, essentially, and he'll spread it out when he's done, and that helps with the spinning and the carding process to have it all together. The belly fur, which is what he worked on first, is just immediately discarded, but everything else he wants to get off in one solid fleece. By the way, I'm Sean Polahimo. I'm the Assistant Director and Director of Operations here, and manage the population of the sheep and do the animal husbandry, and that's why I know a couple of answers to a couple of questions. Thank you.
So this sheep would have been gone through this process 10 times so far?
Annually. So yeah, this in particular sheep is only 5 years old. So this is his 5th time being shorn, and still has a really nice fleece for a male. The male sheep, their fleeces get a lot coarser and a lot dirtier, a lot quicker. The females are more ideal for fleece, which is why we here at Golondrinas try to keep more females on hand than males. But of course, the males for the animal husbandry are important, but a lot of times we'll even trade with other ranches to bring in new males just to keep the bloodline from getting too mixed up.
And we do have a question here from Janine who came through on Facebook. Will he trim the hooves too? That guy has some serious long hooves. That is very true. So James, do you trim around the hooves as well?
We usually do when we're shearing the herd.
Okay, so they usually do, yes. So the more we can get off of them, the better. Again, like we said, you can see it here from the angle you all are getting on Facebook. They get pretty matted. They can get tangled, and fecal matter will get stuck in their fleece. And as you can imagine, that attracts flies and other pests that really affect their health. And that's great. If any folks here have any questions, if anybody on Facebook has questions, go ahead and feed those through.
How many sheep has he sheared?
Ask again, sir?
How many, this gentleman that's, you call it Sean?
This is James over here. Sean is our assistant
No,
director
the
over there.
process, he's called it Sean, or did he call it shear?
Shorn.
Shorn.
They are shorn or they are sheared. James, how long have you been doing this?
Since I was 9.
Since he was 9 years old. So James is a longtime friend of Las Golondrinas.
Yeah. I'm 12.
James is from my neck of the woods up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, the original Las Vegas. And it's a ranching and farming community up there, just like much of the areas around Santa Fe are. So James has been doing this for his whole life, right, James?
Yeah. Yep. Got thrown into it.
James's dad sheared our sheep for 30 plus years, and he lost Juan Jaramillo a couple years ago. Oh, I was talking to the crowd. Mike. Anyway, this is a family tradition.
So as Sean was saying, for those out in Facebook, there's some conversations going on here live. James's family, his father before him was shearing sheep for us here at Las Golondrinas, and so it's a nice family tradition that we maintain around here.
Why do they look like they're struggling?
One more time.
Why do they look like they're trying to get loose?
So why did the sheep? James, do you think he's putting up much of a fight?
No.
A little bit. Well, I think to be fair, it's probably not the most comfortable position, and who wants to be held down like that? But I think at the end of the day, most of the sheep are just going to lay there. They're pretty grateful, I think, to have those fleece cuts. It's really hot. I mean, are you hot standing out here a little bit? Yeah. Imagine how hot they get.
Hey, Laura, could you give us a little history on the Churro Sheep and where they came from and why they came instead of the Murano sheep?
That's great. So Sean reminded me here to talk a little bit about the history of our Churro Sheep. So we do have one breed of sheep here at Las Golondrinas, the Churro, spelled and said just like the tasty cinnamon sugar treats. They came up with the first Spanish settlers in the latter part of the 16th century up El Camino Real. They came originally as a walk-in food source. You're traveling 1,000 miles, you're on foot, there's no refrigeration, so you bring your food along with you. And then your food, once you get here, sort of replenishes itself, right? But eventually they found that this wool was really good in making things like blankets. And for those of you that have already visited the placitas around here, you've seen some of the works that the weavers have done in the colchones, the mattresses on the floor. And then it became a trade item. And then the indigenous groups around the area learned how to weave with it. And it's been a strongly Mexican tradition ever since.
I purposely picked the most difficult sheep to shear. We wanted to make it a long program.
The horns are the hardest.
Handlebars.
So Sean, maybe you can answer this question for us. There's been a lot of comments and questions about the horns. You've noticed that this one has 3. Can you talk a little bit about that and the breed?
As Laura had mentioned earlier, the Churro sheep are one of the, or maybe I just heard you telling other guests earlier, one of the only breeds of sheep that the males and females both have horns. The males and the females occasionally can have up to 4 horns. And I really have no idea why. I don't know the genetics of why it would be advantageous to have 4 horns. It's just something unique in the breed. He actually does have 4. It's just 2 of them are kind of braided together there. Occasionally we do have to cut their horns because they will spiral into their heads and create abscesses, and eventually if they were in the wild it can kill them. Someone had also asked about the hooves. We usually cut the hooves after we shear because right after you cut them they're kind of sharp, so if he started kicking around, James might not cut himself with his shears, but one of his hooves could give him a nice cut. So We usually wait until the very end to cut the hooves.
Do you have a name for this sheep?
This is Aries. It is. It really is. He also he also has a number. I am personally embarrassed that I know the name of the sheep, but that is who this is. But we do have. They all have number tags just so that we can keep the lineage intact. We occasionally trade with the up in Abiquiu, the monks of Monk Brewing Company have a breed of Churro Sheep, and we trade with them and a couple other people in New Mexico. That there is a Navajo Churro Sheep Association that tries to just keep this breed alive. They're an interesting breed. Now, did you talk about how the Moreno sheep in Spain, they did not want to bring the Moreno sheep over from Spain? The King of Spain sent the Churro because he didn't want competition in the New World of Merino wool. So that's why, another reason we ended up with Churro here in New Mexico. So you can see how his shears really glide through the wool pretty easily. That's why we like to shear in the spring, is they start to grow a really nice undercoat. And that undercoat is super buttery, for lack of a better word, because the lanolin that's produced by the sheep really makes that first undercut not too coarse. If you try to shear in the winter, you run into sticks and burrs and all sorts of other things that can make your shears get dull a lot quicker. I'd imagine James can probably do 20 sheep without having to sharpen his shears. And they still do need to get sharpened occasionally. I think he's using Burgund and Ball shears from England as kind of the industry standard.
I'm impressed he can still breathe while bending over like that. I can't do it.
You get used to it.
Looks like
Hey, look. You pass around some of the little.
Do they do this to all of the sheep?
Yep. Yep. Each sheep gets done once a year annually.
Anybody want to piece of that? This actually has less lanolin, the oil in the fleece, than the merino sheep, so it's a little bit better quality for weaving and for the purposes here. Can pull off your pants if you want.
No, I've caught it again.
Do not put in your mouth. Your hands will smell like this the rest of the day, by the way. I fooled you. Anybody want to teach? Want to touch it? I like it now. It's fun. No, not usually.
No shortcuts.
James. James, I'm in. I'm gonna go get my hoof trimmers if you hold it.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Dan, you want to talk about our sheep to shawl? A little bit about the process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So here at Las Golondrinas, we have what we refer to as a sheep to shawl program. And right now, you're seeing the sheep portion of that program. After James is done, we have a specialized group of volunteers that are our weavers, and they will take that fleece over to the other side of the pins, and there's a big table that's over there, and they will gather yucca root from on the property, and yucca root is a natural soap. You take the root, crush it, put it in water, and it'll actually start to suds up. So we will then wash the wool with the yucca root from here on the property, and we'll get kids and guests involved in that as well. You always see kids walking around at festivals with a little matted piece of hair, and that's because they help wash the wool. That was their prize. So they'll take it over there. Well, first they'll skirt the fleece. That means they cut the poop off the ends, and then they'll wash the wool, and then they'll take it back over into the Golondrinas placita, and they will card it, which is basically these two combs, is what it looks like, and they'll work the wool together through those carding combs, basically to straighten the fibers. Then from there they can spin it. There was a variety of methods that were historically used here in New Mexico. There were a few wheels, a few malacates that they would have used to spin the wool into yarn. And they also would have used support spindles, large spindles that are supported in a bowl, to go ahead and spin the fibers together into yarn. And then from there, they could put it into madejas, which are skeins, what most of us know as skeins of yarn. And then here at Las Golondrinas, our weavers even have the ability to dye the wool. So sometimes they'll blend different colors as they're carding to get different shades of gray or white or whatever the case may be. And then once they have that blended, then they'll dye it. And we do that as a demonstration. We have a dye shed. And we'll grow a lot of those dye stuffs right here on the property. The only ones that we actually have to import, as were historically imported into New Mexico, are indigo, which is blue, and cochineal, which is red, cochineal. There's a really well-known exhibit that was up at the Folk Art Museum. Red, the color that dyed the world, I believe is what it was called. And it's a whole exhibit about cochineal. And those were typically imported from the state of Oaxaca. There's a long-standing historical connection between New Mexico and Oaxaca. When some of the first Spanish settlers came up, they actually had blankets that were clearly marked in some of the records that had been supplied from Oaxaca. So let's see, where are we at? We're in the dyeing process. Our weavers will then dye the wool. A whole range of colors. If you haven't seen, be sure to go into our weaving rooms, and you can see the range of colors that they can produce. And then from there, it's either going to go on the loom to be turned into a Rio Grande blanket. Our weavers can also produce herga, which is a traditional utilitarian weave that could be anything from a rug on the floor to be used to wrap up goods and carried maybe on the back of a burro. They can also produce what's called sabanilla, which is a beautiful fine weave that's used as the backing or the base for colcha, which is a traditional couching stitch that's done here in New Mexico to produce incredibly beautiful weavings. Yeah, Laura, anything else to add? Produce rebosos, head coverings and shawls. Any variety of materials can be produced from the Churro Sheep.
Tell people if they're interested, they can come volunteer with us and learn how to do it.
Yeah, so if you were born in the wrong century, as many of our volunteers were, we are always looking for more volunteers. I'm looking over at some of our weavers right now, and they're waving and they're beckoning you to come out to be a volunteer here as well. So if you have an interest in weaving or in the history of New Mexico or being a part of what we do out here, please be sure to call us, ask for Laura Gonzalez, and she will get you set up.
You're just in particular.
Right now, we are trimming the hooves. We do this twice a year.
The
That
reason
is
we do this
pretty
is
much
they-
what I look like when I'm trimming my toenails.
I didn't bring the angle grinder. The reason we do this is the manure is hot, so it can create. They fold over, and over time it can create a hoof rot. So we just do this to make sure that they can get the basically get all that stuff out. The burrows we do every 4 to 8 weeks.
And a lot of people wonder why we're only open June through October and what we do the rest of the time. As you can see, a live working ranch, there's no shortage of things to be done. Constant year-round. Sean and his team are out here 365 days a year, making sure that the animals and the land is taken care of, and that the buildings are replastered and all of those things.
Another item that was produced from the wool of the Churro Sheep and others was the sarape, which is what men wore. It was could be any range of skill level, but in terms of being a beautiful blanket with a hole in the middle to put your head through. And they could say, you could tell, oh, he's up, we're up, and he's gone. So you can see he's getting his bearings. He's adjusting to his newfound freedom. And here you can see James spreading out the fleece so everyone can see just how large this is. And I have to say the skill level involved to do this all in one piece. It's not easy. But James makes it look easy.
Get another round of applause for Fred.
We need your number.
How many can you do in a day?
Depends how dirty they are. Up to 20.
All right, so we had a question of how many can you do in a day here? Go ahead, James.
Depends how dirty they are. We can do up to 20 with the hands. If you have the electric, you can do a lot more.
And we do them all by hand here at Las Golondrinas.
I do everywhere I go. I do
Everywhere, yeah. James is New Mexico true, everybody.
A lot of people don't like it to use the shears, the electric, because he's stressing out.
A little too much stress on the sheep. So from here, as Dan was saying, these fleece will get taken and cleaned and carded and spun and dyed, and then eventually they'll make these beautiful works of art that you'll see when you come out to Las Golondrinas. So I think that's it for our live session. Do we have any more questions coming in from our audience or from Facebook? We got a question over here.
Did you ever let them graze down in the pasture?
No, so the question was, do we let them graze out and about? So we don't here at Las Golondrinas. Our property is a little too big for that, so they just get fed daily. But in New Mexico and other rural communities, it is very common to just let the sheep and the goats graze because they're natural lawnmowers. Well, all right, it looks like they're going to get ready to do another one. Thank you all so much to our Facebook audience for joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Keep up with us on Facebook, on Instagram, on our website. Remember, we are open. We're excited to have our guests back here on site at Las Golondrinas Wednesdays through Sundays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. For all of you fellow New Mexicans out there, Wednesdays are free. Kids 12 and under are always free. We'd love to see you out. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.